everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day, and we are back in Philadelphia for another buy day on the road. And as you can see behind me, we are here at the most interesting museum in all of Philadelphia. It's the Mutter Museum. If you've never been to the Mutter Museum, it is a museum dedicated to medical oddities and the history of medicine in America, because Philadelphia was the center of some of the most important medical experiments and developments that happened in all of 19th century America. And Thomas Mutter was a professor of medicine at Jefferson Medical College here in the city. He was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and he was the most renowned surgeon and plastic surgeon of his time. And he liked to collect specimens, which he used in his teaching. And then at the end of his life, he donated for a museum. And you can still see all the Victorian display cases and the museum very much as it would have appeared in the 19th century if you come to Philadelphia today. But before we get to Thomas Mutter and his collection, I want to talk about a 20th century donation to the museum, which is my favorite part of the museum. Now, Kathy, do you remember when we came to the Mutter Museum and we looked inside and we saw just hundreds and hundreds of objects that had been swallowed or ingested and were blocking people's ability to breathe?
Yes.
They were each extracted and removed by a Philadelphia doctor by the name of Chevalier Jackson, who basically saved each and every one of them and documented them. There are 2,300 plus examples of these amazing things found. And what makes that even more interesting is that before they were donated to the museum, Chevalier Jackson published them in a series of books. And one of those books came into the Scholar this past week, and I get to share it with you. It is by far perhaps the most curious book we have at the Midtown Scholar. And I'm using the word curious. You can make the judgment yourself, Kathy. Here is the title of this book. It is called Foreign Bodies in Air and Food Passages. Now, that in and of itself is probably good. I also like the fact, here I'll show you the title page, that it's one of a series of books. This only shows cases number 631 to 1155. Remember, I told you there were over 2,300 objects in the Mutter Museum. And if this wasn't weird enough, he did dedicate the book to his mother. So let's be happy for him. But the book basically is a listing with photographs of actual size items that were swallowed and ingested by people and then had to be removed by Dr. Jackson. Look at the size of that safety pin. Now, we know that this was a 15-year-old that swallowed the safety pin. We know it took 5 minutes and 3 seconds to get out. And you know what else? Jackson did not use any form of anesthesia because he thought it would be safer and better. So you had to be awake and alert for this. He was also the one of the founders of tracheotomy, and he was the first to perform tracheotomies. And one of the odder things in the museum is that they have a doll, a true creepy doll named Michelle, in which he would show people how to do a tracheotomy. You can see Michelle's slit throat. But let's look at some more interesting things in this book. In addition to safety pins, would you like to guess the most commonly stuck in your throat items?
I have no idea.
Well, it's probably food and bones and all of that. But just so you know, ammunition is a fairly large category. Apparently, a lot of people in the 19th and early 20th century like to swallow bullets.
Oh my.
And there's also a lot of toys. And that is because there are a lot of kids. But you can see the dog and the opera glasses if you go into the museum. Another popular thing swallowed, unfortunately, was coins.
Oh, yes.
So here are real-life examples of the coins. Now, every one of these thousands of items is on display in the museum. And as I say, this was a 20th century donation to the museum. A very interesting collection, and we're seeing, and not a particularly controversial one, at least compared to some of the other things that you can see at the museum. And in the last, especially 5 years, the museum's been under fire because it's one of the few museums in America that still shows and displays human remains. And it has things that have been acquired in rather questionable ways. For instance, there is a slice of Albert Einstein's brain on display, which was removed from his autopsy secretly, even though Einstein wished to be cremated. So I'll leave that alone, but I will tell you a little bit, and that's also a modern addition to the museum. Let me tell you a little bit more about Thomas Mutter.
Okay.
Now, we also have at the Scholar a collection of Mutter's textbooks. And this is the book that made Mutter famous. It was published in Philadelphia, and it's his lectures on the operations of surgery. And one of the things I like about Mutter is Mutter was rather full of himself. So this isn't even his own book. This is somebody else's book with Mutter's editions. But look at the number of titles that he did. It's professor of surgery at Jefferson Medical College. It goes on and on and on and on, and the member of this and member of that, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So also he added the umlaut over the U. He wasn't born Mutter. It was originally Mutter. At any rate, Liam Blanchard, famous Philadelphia publisher, and Mutter was famous because he would charge admission to his surgery, so you could come in and you could see them live if you wanted to. But he also he was one of the first to use ether, so he did use anesthesia in some of the operations. But he's also famous for inventing something called the Mutter flap. Now, in the 19th century, this book was published in 1846, right at the height of his teaching prowess. He basically teaches here in the 1840s and the 1850s, most famous surgeon in America. A lot of people were victims to home fires and burning. It had to do with, in the Victorian era, a lot of clothes were flammable. People were much closer to the hearth than they were today. And so you had a lot of burn victims. And one of the things that he was proud of was that he established a means of grafting skin from one's back to one's face in such a way that it really helped relieve a lot of pain for burn victims. And I'm going to show you some rather graphic images, but this is called the Mutter flap. Now, this woman who he describes and who is very grateful for the procedure basically had been burned in a fire, but a piece of fresh skin from her back was grafted onto her face. And after a series of cosmetic surgeries, she was able to talk again, smile again, close her mouth, and it was very, very successful. And this is incredibly cutting-edge surgery for the 19th century that Mutter was, in fact, performing. This book is just a fascinating book. There are not too many examples of it. You could have walked down the street and purchased it. You can see all sorts of techniques, all sorts of models, but this would be your standard book if you were a doctor in the 19th century, and you could buy this book even if you weren't able to attend Mutter's lectures in person. But let me tell you, Kathy, the most interesting book I brought is something even more extraordinary than that. This book came in with the medical journals that we did on Friday a few weeks ago. And it was owned by a doctor in Hummelstown called Thomas Fox. We talked about him in the last, and you could go into Philadelphia if you were a student at Jefferson Medical College, and you could purchase a copy of this book pre-bound with a Mutter's syllabus for teaching bound in it. So the syllabus is in it, and then bound amongst the syllabus are all sorts of blank pages where you would take your notes when you were coming to class. And so this is a 100% original copy of an actual Mutter student's notes on his lectures while they're being performed at the museum. So just to give you an example, okay, so it says it's page 22, but with the blanks in it, we're probably at page 44. And Mutter is lecturing on wounds, and you can have the syllabus, but then you can add to it examples. So he's saying, Dr. Mutter gives another, example, and Dr. Mutter is showing this example and this example. And so if you wanted to actually put yourself in the medical school classroom with Dr. Fox, you'd get a book like this. And just from a publishing standpoint, I think it's really interesting that this book was published by Jones Printer for students. They could purchase it, right on Carter's Alley back down there, bring it to class, and then write the notes in it. So a one-of-a-kind book, both student notebook and pre-bound book that obviously Dr. Fox cherished for himself. So that is the Mutter Museum. We're going to end with a funny book, and today's funny book is in honor of odd museums and museums that perhaps you want to go see. There is a museum in Boston which I particularly wanted to go to. Is in fact the Museum of Bad Art. And the best part about the Museum of Bad Art is that it's housed in a brewery and outside of Boston. And just take a gander at that photo, that picture for a while. That's what started the movement. It is all artworks which maybe could make their way into regular museums, but are in the International Museum of Bad Art.
A blissful portrayal
funny book,
of
yes,
a monkey.
exactly. Our funny book of the week. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you'll watch next week and every week, Fridays at noon, for more adventures in the world of books.